to start us off, I would like to welcome Miles Richardson. Miles is a senior leader with the Indigenous Leadership Initiative. He serves as the chair of the National Consortium for Indigenous Economic Development at the University of Victoria. Try getting that on a card. And in 2007, he was named an officer of the Order of Canada. Today, he will be speaking with the Honorable Randine Neil. She was first elected as the MLA for Powell River, Sunshine Coast in 2004, and then appointed Minister of Water, Land, and Resource Stewardship. Again, try to get that on a card. Before being elected, the minister spent almost 20 years as a reporter and news anchor at Global BC. Most recently, she worked with the BC Parks Foundation on the new St. Paul's Hospital. Please join me in greeting Miles and Randine.
With what? For
You have,
the whole panel or for?
yeah, not for you.
I get as much time as I want, right?
You get 24 and a half minutes. I'll take the last 30 seconds. Deal? Okay.
Thank you. Haichka Siam. I'm Miles Richardson. I am Kilslai Kaji Sting. It's my Haida name. I'm a senior advisor for the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, and really happy to be here this morning and really excited to be in this discussion with Minister Randine Neil. Minister Neil is Minister for the Government of British Columbia, and she's Minister of Walrus, they call it. Water, air, land, of course, and resource use stewardship. So when we talk about the Guardians and we talk about the relationship between First Nations in each of our respective territories in the Crown, we're talking to her on behalf of her government. And this morning I'd like to talk basically about three things. One, I'd like to talk about having the Guardians gather here, understand the government of BC's general approach. As you know, we initiated a Guardians network across Canada with the government of Canada. BC has stepped up in recent years and taken a fairly active leadership role in building out Guardians programs in British Columbia. Very welcome initiative. We've had a couple of stumbles recently. We'll talk about those. Secondly, I wanted to talk about what are the needs now between ourselves in establishing the Guardians network, and third, what's the road forward? We could fit those into our discussion here. But let me begin by just going back for 2 minutes and talking about what Leon just did in leading us through a song, in each of our ways, our own ceremonies for in the Haida way, we'd call it mourning, for acknowledging the passing of previous generations of our nation, and that's really important. I think in the last few months we've had many leaders pass. One, Hemus Klalilaka, Bill Wilson from the Comox people, and with each of you have each had many important people passing. But I'll tell you, in August, we signed a title recognition agreement with the government of April with BC and in August with Canada. And when I went into those rooms to sign those agreements, each of those had been under discussion and various forms of negotiation for 30 plus years. I went in that room, I saw a lot of happy members of citizens of the living generation who were bringing this agreement home. But mostly what I saw in there was all those over the years who'd stood under a lot of duress and made those days happen. I saw those elders who'd stood on the line, who'd stood up when governments like the government of BC were accusing them of being criminals for stewarding their territories, for looking after their lands. And they just stood proudly and with the absolute knowledge that they were right. Not only were they right, they had a responsibility to do what they were doing. And in that hall, I remembered the blockades, the line, and this one morning at the height of the confrontations, we had a bunch of young warriors ready to do battle with to meet the RCMP troops that were there. And as we were getting ready to do this, our elders stepped forward and totally, like, to me, we were in the midst of serious business. You know, this was a dangerous place. We had work to do, and we're going to do it. And the elders stepped forward, and I never forget that moment. And that's kind of what you're reminding me of this morning, Leon. One elder woman, Ethel Jones, I loved her. She was a respected elder. And so I'm kind of getting a little angry, saying, "You got to get out of here. This is a dangerous place this morning. Go down to camp." She comes up to me, put her hands on me, and really gently says, "All our life, we've been watching our islands being destroyed and wanted to do something about it. This is our moment. Don't deny us." That was just overwhelming, and just the peacefulness, the lovingness. I just got up and went down to camp myself and asked the young warriors who'd been preparing for battle to do the same. It was one of the toughest things they did. But today, now we're signing agreements to do those same things with the governments of the day, and we're talking about revamping all the laws in British Columbia to harmonize with Indigenous laws in our territories. So it's really a good time to remember all those important relationships. Leon, thank you for reminding us of that, and let's just keep moving forward. We have challenges in front of us. We have some obstacles. We'll overcome them because we know who we are. We will continue to be who we are as Indigenous people, and these relationships with the Crown, including British Columbia, are the right thing to do. So, Randine, I'd like to leave most of the time for you to speak. We explained your ministry, Walrus. I'd just like you to tell the Guardians gathered here from across Canada. We have Guardians from across Canada, and there's a lot from British Columbia. And with you as Minister of Walrus, but generally from your government's approach, what's your approach today to building relationships with Indigenous peoples around water, air, and land? And I'll just turn it over to you, and thank you for being here with us this morning.
Thank you, Miles, and thank you so much for that amazing beginning. I do just want to say two things. I'm absolutely honored to be here with you today. My daughter actually works for the Haida Nation. She's a biologist. She works in the fisheries department. And number two, I hate politicians. So I'm here as an ally and someone that we can work together and do amazing things. And I think
Geez, this is getting too close. I hear you're friends with my niece and nephew.
I
also.
I am. And I'm going to tell them everything that you said today. My favorite part of being the Minister of Water, Land, and Resource Stewardship is the very last word, stewardship. My only job is to help nations steward their land and leave it in a better place than how I came to find it, and to steward that, set it up to steward it for the next 7 generations and beyond. That's incredibly important to me. A wise person just said to me the other day, actually, that restoration is reconciliation. And what the government can do is partner or even just get out of the way of the good work that the Guardians are doing and will continue to do. When I first learned about the Guardian program, Watchmen, different names in different nations, I realized that this is going to save our province and our country. That recognition that we can work on the land, steward the land, restore the biodiversity that's been eroded, and do it in a way for all of our future generations is something that is so critically important in this time of the climate crisis. I was just listening actually to the CBC last night. I forget the name of the program, but it was a program called Healing the Land, about how the Guardians come in after these massive forest fires now and find a way to heal the land, because with climate change, our land is never going to be the same again, and it needs to be stewarded. And the Guardians need to come in and work on restoring the land in a good way, to ensure that it grows in the way that it needs to. So the benefits are multiple. I think this is just the beginning, and I'm so glad that the province is able to be a partner in this as well.
Thank you. And being a partner means recognizing what Canada has referred to, I think quite properly, as the nation-to-nation relationship. And on Canada's side, called the Crown side, that nationhood is divided between the federal and provincial authorities. So there's a complex governance relationship to navigate going forward. In the past 5 years, are you satisfied with how that relationship has evolved? The First Nations, through the Assembly of First Nations, led by the ILI, has put together this Guardians network. Canada has come in with some increasingly flexible funding. We're not there yet. It doesn't really fully reflect that nation-to-nation relationship there, but we're getting close, and we're close enough. But now the key is BC to come in and reflect that with your government initiatives. Like, a lot of what your government does is in stewardship of water, land, and air. And you being head of that ministry, are you pleased with how that relationship has evolved over the past 3 to 5 years?
Thank you. I should preface this by saying I've only been the minister since last fall, so I'm a newbie. I'm still learning the ropes a little bit. But I think that we still have a long way to go. I think not just the G to G to G relationships, like the Tripart Agreement on Nature, where nations in BC and the province and the federal government signed a multi-$100-million commitment to help restore and steward the land. I think that as we know better, we do better, and we're moving in the right direction, but we have to keep moving forward. I think there's still some education in the wider province where people need to understand the benefits of the Guardian program, and working as partners will benefit everybody in BC. So I do think that there's still more education to be had there. The province has put in, I think it's $5 million into training Guardians, but I know that the capacity of being able to do further training programs is critical. for all of the nations who want these programs in their territories. The Conservation Fund, which is a $300 million conservation financing mechanism that works with First Nations and accepts applications from Guardians to steward the land and restore the biodiversity. So we're moving in the right direction. We have some programs, but there's always more that we can do and that we should do.
I want to come back to that capacity building aspect of a nation-to-nation, government-to-government relationship. But I want to get right to the first point of the approach to stewardship here in British Columbia. 4 or 5 years ago, your government put in place, and I know this precedes you, but it's still one of the main initiatives of your government, the DRIPA legislation, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. And your government led the world in committing to harmonizing all of your existing legislation with the reality of Indigenous title, with the reality of Indigenous nationhood. Huge undertaking, and you've been working, I think, quite impressively, quite hard through all your ministries to make this happen. At the same time, you signed with my nation, the Haida Nation, a title recognition agreement, which is a big step. That's really what our people have been asking for since we started having these conversations. You know, in the late 1800s, all of our leaders, when Canada brought reserve commissions out here to cut off reserve lands for us, said, you can't give us land that's ours. Let's talk about this title dispute. This past year, British Columbia has recognized Haida title to all of our islands, all of the land area, exactly the right thing to do. And there's still a lot of work to do in that regard, but the approach, the relationship has been set. And then a couple of weeks ago, you totally turn back on that. You totally turn around that good approach and legislate the power of your government to unilaterally override any of those considerations of partnership, of government to government, nation to nation at an equal level, which you'd committed to. In terms of land and air and water stewardship, how are you going to square that going forward?
Yeah, thank you. It's a hard and humbling question, and I thank you for answering it, and I'll do my best.
I didn't answer it. I
Or ask it. Sorry. Do you want to answer it? Damn it.
I can't imagine what an answer might be.
Bills 14 and 15. Bill 15 is the Infrastructure Act. Minister Bowen Ma, who's the Minister of the Infrastructure Act, prior to this role was the Minister of Emergency Development and Climate Resistance, and she spent 3 years working with the nations across BC on the bill called EDMA, the Emergency Disaster Management Act. And that was in full accord with DRIPA, which passed unanimously in 2019 by all members of the legislature. So she has admitted that we didn't do the proper consultation with the nations. She's apologized for it. She is a person who I know is absolutely 100% dedicated to DRIPA and doing the right thing and following the rules of law. And moving forward, she's committed that through the regulations, Bill 15 was an enabling act to allow the infrastructure ministry to get up and start building those schools and hospitals that we need. But going forward with the processes and the regulations will be full consultation and partnership with nations. So I understand that this is a setback, but on behalf of the government, I want to assure you that we are going to do everything we can to work together and make it right and do it in a good way. Part of what my ministry is responsible for, again, as we said, is this stewardship of the waterland and resources in BC. And we do have some programs that we're working on very, very closely in partnership with nations. The Watershed Security Strategy, which was started by the Indigenous Water Table, which is an amazing piece of work that we've done together. The Biodiversity and Ecosystem Health Framework, which is part of what we need to go forward to steward the land in a new way, to understand that our land is worth more whole than extracted from. And that's part of the commitment from the Old Growth Strategic Review done by Gary Merkel and a few others, to understand that paradigm shift that we all need to understand, that the Guardians and the Watchmen know so well, that our land is worth more whole, as I said, than extracted from, and it's getting to that place where we can have sustainable growth in and grow our economy in a good way, while still going full forward with restoration and taking care of our ecosystem and our biodiversity, health, and reconciliation. All of those things can go forward hand in hand in hand, and we do that by working with nations on a government-to-government agreements going forward.
And you have DRIPA legislation, you have environmental review legislation, you got in place a lot of the important steps to getting there, to consulting, to negotiating, to getting to agreement. But in the likely scenario where you reach a point where you don't agree, especially on one of these prioritized major national projects, how are you going to resolve that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, as we keep talking, we keep working through things. I find that when you bring diverse voices to the table, as long as everybody feels like their voice is being represented at the table, and you have those really tough conversations, especially when you don't agree, but you sit there and you do the hard work and you come to a conclusion. This is what I have learned in government. You think you can just go ahead, things are black and white and you do the right thing, and it's not. Everything is shades of gray. Everything needs to have people's voices heard, or at least people's voices represented. And if we do that, then we can move forward on those challenging tasks in a way where we do it together. Even though we don't get all of our own way, at least we had our say. At least our voices have been heard, and then we can move forward in a way that everybody can accept and support.
Well, that's where we have to get, and that's where we all thought we were, but before the last few weeks, that's where we have to get again. And I know that the will, certainly from those nations who've established Guardians programs, have shown their commitment to getting along in a good way and making that work. But it's in these situations where we can't come to an agreement, where our values diverge and our objectives diverge so much that we're going to revert to fighting, whether it's in the courts or on the land. And that's not anywhere we need to be. British Columbians don't need to be there, and First Nations certainly have better things to do than that, but that's what it'll happen if that comes. And I've seen moments like this before. I mean, when I won't go into the details, we got important Guardians work to do here, but we've been at this impasse before, and the words you're saying are the right ones. We're in this together. Everyone accepts that here. British Columbia isn't going anywhere. And we need to figure out how to hear each other, see each other, and respect each other going forward. So going back to the capacity issue, in order to engage, whether it's for consultation or whether it's for negotiation right up to government consent, governments need capacity. You know that more than anybody. To be a responsible stewardship over land, air, and water, it takes resources. It takes government resources. It takes financial resources. How are we going to work together going forward on that, on building the capacity between the government of BC is important, but in each First Nation to be able to represent themselves at these tables effectively?
Thank you. Yeah, good. I'll give you one example, and maybe it will kind of help paint a picture of how my ministry, at least, moves forward in this. So a couple weeks ago, we announced what we're calling the Northwest Strategy. So we're working with the Tahltan, Taku River Tlingit, Kaska, Nishka, and Gitnyaw nations to work on land use planning in that area. And as part of that, the nations have been working for years with their communities to try to establish what their values are on the land. There are many self-declared IPCAs up there, which are amazing areas that we all need to preserve for the next 7 generations and beyond. Some people call it the Serengeti of the North. So what we're doing as a government, we're working with the nations on a G2G kind of partnership, and we're identifying which areas of the land needs to be protected, which areas of the land can be opened up for development, and that is something that we're going to try to do in the next 12 months, because that's what the nations have asked us to do. And I think in those 12 months, we're going to show that we can work together and we can partner and we can build an area in this province where we have protected areas where watchmen and guardians are going to steward that land forever. And we'll have areas where we can open it up to economic development, because that is what the nations want to do. And that is reconciliation in my mind, and that's how we do it properly, and that's one example of what we plan to do going forward.
Okay, I have a specific question here.
Uh-oh.
How are you helping to ensure that Indigenous rights and knowledge are central in land and water management decisions across your government?
That
I mean, just in terms of what's going on right now to ensure that's happening. What's going on in your government right now to ensure that's happening the best in terms of your commitment to this approach?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think understanding that the two-eyed seeing approach, there is a lot of skepticism out there right now. People don't believe the truth anymore, and we need to understand that there is one truth in terms of reconciliation, in terms of the climate crisis. There's one truth, and we have to start there.
You believe that?
Oh, 100%. Yes, yeah. And the Guardians are in terms of the land and stewarding the land, the Guardians are going to help us get there, because they're showing us the data, they're showing us the science, they're showing us their Indigenous knowledge of what it used to be like, what their ancestors and their elders have told them stories of you know, in where I live in the Swea of the Shishal Nation, where in a little town called Calpalane, where you could just walk down to the water and scoop salmon out of the water, but all our eelgrass is gone. And we need to restore that eelgrass and those kelp beds that act as nurseries, and that benefits everybody. So doing that work together and understanding and listening to that knowledge is how we're going to move forward.
Yeah. Okay, you're a new minister. You're looking forward with this huge file, the huge area of responsibility important to First Nations. You've seen, prior to you coming to government, this big initiative through DRIPA. Tell us what's impressed you about your government's efforts in some examples around your efforts to implement DRIPA and harmonize BC legislation with Indigenous interests.
Thank you. So I'll tell you why I got into politics. Such a dirty word.
But some
Examples.
all of the Guardians are looking at ways of working with you, of manifesting this. So, you know, what things have impressed you about what your government has done over the past few years?
Well, I think, and thank you for the clarification. I think funding kind of Guardian education programs is something that our government has done I do have a list. Do you want me to read the list?
If that's what you want to do.
Let me just see if I can see the list. So we've worked with nations to develop the Guardians and Stewardship Training Initiative, administered by the New Relationship Trust. We worked with a group of representatives from First Nation governments and organizations to distribute over $4 million to support training initiatives to Guardians. I still think we have to do so much more. We're working alongside Guardians in marine stewardship and conservation, particularly in the Great Bear Sea, and that was the Heiltsuk Nation there, and the Marine Protected Area Network Plan. The Together for Wildlife strategy was co-developed in partnership with nations, and Guardians play an integral role in that for us as well. And then again, as I was mentioning, the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Health Framework, is going to help us move forward in a good way by expanding those Guardian and Watchman programs. You know, the federal government in the early 2000s canceled, all of the so many programs that actually went out and tested our waters and looked after our forests. And the Guardians are critical in taking that on, and that is the way that we're going to be able to steward and restore that biodiversity in the future. I absolutely know that. So we need to find the capacity to expand the capacity of Guardian and Watchman programs across this province. We have to. We don't have a choice.
And you're open to having them replace those roles and gathering all that essential data for responsible stewardship. You're open to that.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
I wanted to ask a question here. There was about wildfire. This is an area that Guardians it's a need in this country. It's obvious if you look at, what's going on across Canada right now with the wildfires out of control and the need to do something about them, and how Indigenous knowledge and stewardship can deal with that. Last year was the worst year for wildfires in this province's recorded history. Fires burned 2.8 million hectares, which is 10 times more than the yearly average. How can Indigenous Guardians play a greater role in wildfire management, drawing on their stewardship knowledge and presence on the land? That's a concrete example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, it is, exactly. I think the Ministry of Forests now has a small but growing program that has prescribed burns, and that is something that we need to do much more of. This is the knowledge that, quite frankly, the government should have listened to decades and decades and decades ago, right? Because that maybe would have prevented a lot of these massive forest fires that we're seeing now. We understand now from Indigenous knowledge that the forests need to burn in a particular way to stay healthy, and those prescribed burns will help us do that. And then stewarding the land, as I said, after there are those burns, the documentary I was listening to on CBC driving to Victoria yesterday, it was the fire in Lillooet in 2023. And the nations were working to help restore that charred, ashy land where, temperatures have risen so much, and with climate change, everything is unpredictable. And somebody said, we have two seasons now, wildfire season and flood season. And that is not where we need to be able to steward and restore the biodiversity on the land. So listening to the Indigenous knowledge and the practices and going back to the way that we need to get back to bring back that biodiversity, and the health of our ecosystem affects the health of all of us. So those are the things that we need to be able to do after those fires and to prevent those fires as well.
Thank you. Looking forward from here, from where we sit today, and into building Guardians across British Columbia, and I think really importantly, the relationship between Indigenous Guardians and through their nations and your government. What general advice or perspectives could you offer to Guardians programs on the land and building this strong, mutually beneficial relationship going forward on these stewardship activities. Do you know what I'm asking? I want you to think, just look forward and think of what would be useful to you, your government.
Okay, I think I know what you're asking. I'll take a stab at it, and you tell me.
We're looking forward, so there's.
Okay, good. First, I don't think I'm in any position to give advice. I would rather just listen to the people who are on the land, what you're telling me and what you're seeing and what you're experiencing, to know what we need to do as government to help restore that biodiversity. Number one, I think that's incredibly important. You're the ones that are out there doing the work. And we need to listen, deeply listen to that, and help assist you to succeed in where we need to get to. In terms of what we could use from you is just, I guess, and I don't know if I'm answering this, it is the communication. We want to hear from you, and then I need to fight to get you more capacity to be able to hire more guardians or more watchmen. We need the science, which is what you're doing, and that knowledge to understand where we need to get to and where we are now and how far it is to get to that place, and what kind of capacity we need to get to the place that we need to get to. And then I need to fight like hell with other ministers like Tamara Davidson and Christine Boyle to be able to get us to that place and a fight for that capacity that I know that you need, and I know that's important.
Yeah, one of your predecessors, Murray Rankin, who was Minister of Reconciliation, understood very clearly the need not only for the capacity and resources on the ground for stewardship activities, but for helping for First Nation governance capacity to be able to engage in policy discussions toward agreement on policy approaches between First Nations and BC. That capacity at that level was equally very important for moving forward. So we'll just leave that with you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for being here this morning, Minister. Do you have any closing comments again, thank you so much for taking the time to attend. I know you've got a big cabinet gathering up island you got to get back to, and thank you so much for taking the time, joining us here this morning, and underlining the importance your government gives to the Guardians Network in BC and working as partners to make it all that it can be and making this a better place for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can I just say it's an honor sitting up here with you. Tamara said you were going to make me cry, but you didn't. So.
I promised her I wouldn't.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
And then with Leah sitting there, I wouldn't dare. But thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you. One more round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you. Well, that was great. And you know what, Miles? What are Little Sisters for? Hey, am I mixed up? All right, thank you to Minister Neil and Miles for that fabulous discussion. Now I invite our dear friend Val, the Executive Director of the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, to come up. She will be joined by Linda Dwyer, who is the Senior Operations. Quiet now, quiet now. We want to have outside conversations. You need to go outside, but you need to be here to hear this fabulous panel, so keep it down. Before joining, Linda, as I was saying, is the Senior Operations Advisor with the Indigenous Leadership Initiative. Before joining ILI, Linda managed the Natural Resource and Wildlife Office in her community of Kitikinzibi, Anishinaabeg. Pretty good. Incidentally, both Linda and Val are registered foresters. Let's have a clap for that. And they will talk with us about how to demonstrate the success of Guardians and how to make the case for continued federal investment to Guardian programs. So BC off the hook, because you were just on the hook, now it's the feds. Welcome to Val and Wendy.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you so much, Leah. Incidentally, Linda and I graduated out of forestry school almost at the same time. So Linda's actually the first Indigenous woman in Quebec to have an RPF. Which is a wonderful career for anybody who's thinking of going back to school. I totally encourage you to think about becoming a forester. I don't know about you, Linda, but it's been a blessing for me to have that kind of background. So before we go into how we look at the returns on investment and the success of the programs, I thought I'd take a little moment to talk about a little bit where we are in getting the movement well supported and what's happening in terms of the federal government. This is my little slide mover, hey? Great. So first, what is the role of the Indigenous Leadership Initiative versus the ILI? By the way, that's a photo of when we first met. We told the story yesterday of when we were first on the George River. So that was when I had Jamie come on an adventure for a very long time. By the way, that was taken in early September in the George River, just to give you a sense of the climate difference from where we're from. The role of the Indigenous Leadership Initiative has really been, I kind of, talk about it like we're the giant cheerleaders. We're the advocacy for the movement. We help bring a voice to the movement, to highlight the successes, and we spend a lot of time in Ottawa. To give you an example, I'll tell you a little bit more about the beginning of the movement. I know some of you in the room know this story, but there's a lot of you who are new. And sometimes it's really good to know where we've come from, to know where we're going. And so back in 2014, the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, along with what was then called Tides Canada, now called Make Way, and then called the Nature Conservancy, now called Nature United, got together and said, we should really bring together the existing stewardship programs across this country and see what is their elements of success? What is making them work? How are they doing it? And when we did a little search across the country, there was about 30 programs that had been established then. Some of whom are in the room. Some people in the room were actually at that meeting. I saw Jimmy Nuna earlier, he was there, and others. And the result of that meeting was actually quite remarkable. There were 3 very clear instructions that emerged. There you are, Jimmy. That emerged out of that meeting. One was that the Guardians had never really met together. This was the first time they were able to have exchanges. And they said, this network idea is kind of cool. We should have a network. The second thing that they said was all of them, with a few notable exceptions, the Haida Watchman program was one of those exceptions, were dependent on project-based funding. And at the time, I was fairly new to the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, and I had been the manager of the Innu Nation Guardian program for a while, and I remember about 80% of my time when I was there was spent in filling out application forms. And this was a few years ago, so we were on dial-up internet then in Labrador, and I can tell you that sometimes it took me 2 weeks to have a form be able to be sent into the old Environment Canada system that I hope they've updated since then, but that thing had existed for 20 years when I was trying to use it. We love our friends at Environment Canada. But that was part of the reality. The third thing they asked was that the profession be recognized and that their job be recognized, because every time they had to advocate for their roles, whether it was them or their nation doing that, everybody was asked the question, well, are they trained? Do they have the professional acumen to do this job? Are they technicians? And so with those three instructions, all of us who were there have been running with that. And as the Indigenous organization out of the three host organizations, we felt a particular responsibility to advance this movement. So Miles, Ovid Mercredi at the time, Steve Kakfwi, Dave Porter, we made a plan and we started hitting the ground in Ottawa. In 2015, in the Special Assembly in Ottawa, in December 2015, we helped advance the resolution at the Assembly of First Nations that gave us a sense of a mandate to advance this. The chiefs who advanced that resolution, by the way, were Chief Jean-Charles Pietachot from the community of Ikwanjit and Chief Tammy Cook-Searson from the community of Larange in Saskatchewan. And I want to give a shout out to the community of Larange right now that is evacuated, unfortunately, due to severe wildfire. And it's been quite stressful for the community of Larange. So we're sending Larange all our love from the... Oh, good. Thank you, Amy, for that update. Amy, fire specialist. So that's great. That's great that they got sent home. And so when we did that lobby, we did 180 meetings in Ottawa. Now, I don't know if y'all have had meetings in Ottawa. That's a lot of pounding the pavement. And all of the meetings were positive. Everybody loved the idea of Guardians. The only exception to that was the Department of Indigenous Affairs in Ottawa. Fascinating, huh? And I know you all laughed because that's not a surprise. And to their credit, they came through. Now, we had been proposing $500 million. That was our best napkin math for what it would take for a third of First Nations across this country to have a Guardians program. They met us at 25 million. And I remember we had a little internal meeting amongst us and we said, should we be happy about this? How do we feel? It's 1/16 of what we had asked for. And Miles, in his wisdom, said, well, let's put down some conditions and some expectations with the minister. The minister was Catherine McKenna at the time, and she had invited us into her parliamentary office to celebrate the budgetary announcement. And we walked in and we said, Catherine, we have two conditions to support this. One is that you're going to build this as a nation-to-nation initiative. And wherever we're going to move forward, that you are going to make sure that this is going to reinforce your commitment to a nation-to-nation approach. Second, you're going to work with us to grow this money. This is a pilot. We're going to figure out how to work together. And by the way, you're not going to run it like a program. And we're going to help you figure out what that means. And to her credit, she said, okay. Not only did she say okay, she made sure that her department was ready to receive our advice. Then we started working on letting her know what not being a program looks like, which is not an easy thing because departments, what they know how to do is run programs. And we formed the joint working group. We had 8 individuals, some of who are in this room, in the early joint working group. Keith Christmas, I'm thinking of you. Others, Linda was on that committee. Frank helped early on quite a bit. And we helped them understand that someone who is in Ottawa, in the lovely building of Sacré-Cœur, where the department is based in Gatineau, can never understand really the applications and the ideas of the communities. They just don't. Many people who work in Ottawa have never been to communities. They've been exposed to indigeneity in Ottawa, but that's not the same as really stepping into communities and understanding the dynamics and what happens on the ground. And so I should look at the time here. And so we said, we can help with that. We've got 8 people who've been running Guardian programs, and collectively, there's almost 400 years of experience doing that. Surely, we have something to offer in helping you make these financial decisions. Also, we welcomed representatives from the government itself, and not just from Environment and Climate Change Canada, but also Indigenous Affairs, and the department split in two, somewhere in the middle of that story, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and Natural Resources Canada. We're sitting on that. And we completely redesigned the way that the intakes were happening, and it's part of the success and what led to the building of the network. The network is essentially the next step after that joint working group effort. And now the network and the joint working group and the new renewed advisory council, I can't remember what it's called, Jamie, you can, advisory fund or something, will be essentially the new iteration of that idea. Now, in 2021, the government announced their then largest investment in Indigenous-led conservation. It was $340 million, $161 million of which was for Indigenous protected and conserved areas, and $173 million of which was for Guardians. Now, Parks Canada got 72 point something million out of that. You can correct me, Nathan, when you talk to me later. The Department and Environment Canada got about $100 million, and they distributed that money under the distinction-based approach because, of course, the 10 principles on the relationship between Canada and the Indigenous peoples was in place then. That was advocated for by the then Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould. And so the 2021 commitment expires in 2026. Which is very, very, very soon. That means that we have to go and grow the movement to a place where there is more financing. Now, for the record, when we work with Canada and approached Canada, the idea was not that Canada or federal funding or any funding from Crown governments would fully pay for a Guardians program. That's not the idea. What it is meant for them to pay for is the core structure upon which then other partnerships can be built. And I'm going to pick on the Innu Nation program because I know it very well. But that means that their core funding includes things like the Guardians funding, but also core co-management agreements around parks management, forestry. The Innu program also monitors the largest nickel mine in the world at Voisey's Bay, those kind of things, but also other partnerships as the opportunities arise. So when Muskrat Falls was developed, there was an impact benefit agreement that was signed with Innu Nation that had Guardians associated to that. When there was a new highway that actually finally connected the Trans-Labrador Highway and made it a Trans-Labrador Highway, there was an impact benefit agreement associated to that, with Guardians monitoring the opening of a new road. That's the ultimate model, because that is not only reinforcing, it's always important to have multiple sources of money for anybody who does investments, y'all know that. But it's also a premise for building partnerships and relationships with other users, other land users, other proponents, other partners, to bring in all of that into the Guardians realm. So when we are now at a position where we're going to have to reapproach the federal government about renewing their investments, and that is part of the narrative to doing that. So what are we going to do? We need your help. In fact, the way that we do this is that the federal government is going to look at the success of the program, and Jennifer, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know that the Guardian programs is one of the most successful programs that has ever been run in Environment Canada. And so there's lots of good reasons. There's lots of good reasons for the Department of Environment and Climate Change Canada to be with us in making this ask, and I know they are. In fact, I had breakfast with Tara Shannon, who is the head of the Canadian Wildlife Service, just a couple of weeks ago, and Tara says, I'm in. We need to do this. We also have to figure out what is the ask? How much is the right number? And to do that in a way where we understand the fiscal situation of this country and where we are. Because you all know, as a country, we are facing some global challenges that are affecting our economy. In fact, Bill 14 and 15 and Bill 5 and the forestry reform in Quebec and the Sovereignty Acts in Alberta and Saskatchewan are examples of governments thinking about reinforcing economies because of those global pressures. And so we have to take that in mind. The other thing is we have a government that has now announced that the next budget is going to be in the fall. And we know that this will be a budget in response to tariffs and a lot of those other global pressures. And so is the fall the right moment for this to happen? We don't know yet. We're trying to work very diligently to figure that out. Is it then, and what is the federal government going to do in terms of the next budget? It's very, very weird to have a budget in the fall. In fact, we haven't waited this long for a federal budget since 1960 as a country. And so what does it mean to have a budget in the fall? Are they going to go back to a spring budget cycle? It's usually better to do that because of the fiscal year, et cetera, and the way that the government mechanisms work. We don't know yet. We even are not quite sure yet where the Guardians is going to be housed. Because you might have noticed when Prime Minister Carney announced his cabinet that there is a Minister of State for Nature. Her name is Nathalie Provost. She represents the riding of Châteauguay in Quebec. And I'm not quite sure what that would look like. She is under the Minister of Canadian Identity, and I can't remember the rest of the letters, but Stephen Guilbeault, who is the former Minister of Environment. And so what is the role of Stephen Guilbeault in this? Who has been a champion of Guardians? You'll remember at the last gathering, he attended and did a fireside chat with us. No fire either at the last gathering, Leah. We'll work on that. So he's been a champion. We're not sure. What role will Minister Julie DeBruson have in the future? We're not sure. They're still figuring it out. This new government has also hit the ground running in a way that is really interesting because normally an elected government at the federal level has more time before they call the House back. And so, but in this case, Prime Minister Carney called the House back quite rapidly. In fact, so rapidly that most ministers didn't even have chiefs of staff in place before they sat in the House. And so all of that is still being figured out, and I can tell you that we are doing everything we can to help figure that out. So, and we're going to need your help once we do that when we make the call. The process normally to getting a federal budget investment is that you make an application to the Parliamentary Committee on Finance. Then you go and you testify and you work with the committee. You hope that your application makes it into their report to the budget process. You work with finance so that the finance department understands the values of what you're doing. And then you work with parliamentarians who are eventually going to have to vote for this and their roles as parliamentarians. So that is the process that we're going to need. To make the best case for this investment, we need to show what is the return on that investment. And not just in terms of environmental responsibilities or what you think is like the direct job of a guardian, but how does that flow out? What does it mean for a guardian to have an employment for their own family? What does that mean then for their extended family to have a guardian and the example and the revenue within that family land? What does that mean for the community, and what does that mean for others around? And so, like the program in Tlutsoke, after they signed the agreement for the new Taranane National Park, I can tell you that when they signed that agreement, they went shopping in Yellowknife for new skidoos and boats and Canada Goose gear and everything they needed to be guardians on the land. Well, that was an economic boom for Yellowknife, right? So that kind of thing we need to really document and learn. And I know that some of you have been involved with Linda and the network in doing just that. And so we have some preliminary results to show you of our latest effort in documenting the social return on investment for these programs. And so I'm going to just turn it over to Linda, because what we want is that every nation who wants a Guardian program has one and could be supported into the future to do so that we can together really finally fulfill what could be our shared vision of what a better Canada looks like. So with that, I would love to turn it over to you, Linda, and I know Vanessa's ready to go to answer any questions. And if anybody wants to talk to me about what it's like to lobby or learn how your voice can help us in those efforts, please approach me or any of the other ILIers, because we're going to need all your help, and I think we're going to get there. And I hope that the next investment from the Government of Canada will be even bigger than the previous one. So thank you so much for a few minutes to talk about this.
Is it red, green? That's okay. Kwe Kakana, thank you so much for attending this really important work that we're doing. It's a little bit overwhelming. You're going to see a lot of slides. But first, I would like to thank everyone for attending. You guys have I've been harassing you with emails, and please reach out. I would love to talk to you personally. I've gotten to know many of you now, virtually, unfortunately. Okay, we'll just go through. We're still in, here we go. So the National Guardian Program Evaluation. So we started off with a pilot last fall. As Val was mentioning, we are working with NGN closely and also EcoPlan. And we have Vanessa in the front here. Miigwech. So the first pilot that we started was in my home community, Kitigan Zibi. And we chose that because sadly I knew I could go in and kind of, have a full 8 hours. It was a lot of work. The initial surveys, there was flaws. We had to learn what language to use, what process. There was a lot of things, especially when we were talking about ranking and weighting. Communities, the Guardians were like, this is all important work. We can't prioritize. But we needed to figure this out. So this was the first stop. And you can see from the map, my community is in southern West Quebec. Then the next community we went to was the Matawa. So the Four Rivers over here. Quay ladies. So we actually had a chance to go up to Thunder Bay and have a discussion with these lovely people and learn from them. And this was a moving document. We kept learning, adapting the booklets. The next two groups were kind of simultaneous, and it was the Kashkugotne Foundation with Lexi up somewhere. There she is. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make it up, but the lovely Lexi was able to carry out this assessment in her community. And then the last one was the Squamish Nation, and they are somewhere here as well. So we actually, one of the NGN staff actually went to visit them in person. So these were all very, there was a lot of work to happen, so we needed to have personal conversations. So after this, and actually the last one, because things had changed so much, we had to go back into my community and bug our Guardians again. But it was very beneficial because the process was streamlined. We went from 3 books to 4 books. The books are, booklets, I should say, are more for the administrator, where we're asking where the funding's coming from, salaries, and also the question was, what would happen if you didn't have Guardian funding? Or what would a full comprehensive program look like? What would the budget? And that's something we never get asked. We're always responding to federal programming. So this is a very overwhelming screen. So basically, I'm going to use my little cheat sheets here because it's very small. So we did some 7 core benefits. So first was cultural well-being, which is at the top. So this is cultural identity, language, ceremony, knowledge transfer, access to traditional foods, cultural heritage, land-based activities, protection and identification of cultural sites. There's community capacity, building leadership skills and governance in from the Guardian's perspective. They're role models in our community. You know, they're leaders, and they're supporting the community collaboration. This is all benefits guardians are having and receiving, and also contributing to the community. And of course, the one near and dear, taking care of the land. Conservation and protection, you know, response, oil spills from the Hellsook I had read, you know, these, you guys are on the ground. There's species for food, social, ceremonial, protection, identifying, education in the community or even outside of the community. Information, collection, baseline data, not just from a monitoring side, but ensuring that our community place-based knowledge is at the forefront of this in the data collection, listening to our elders, our knowledge holders. And as well, it's strengthening connection to our land. There was the financial benefits that Val had mentioned. There was the direct, not only the salaries, purchases, but also there's been development of traditional economies, you know, support outside of. Governance of territory, restoring Indigenous sovereignty, being transparent and accountable from a leadership perspective. And lastly, strengthening relationships, our voice at the national level. We are involved at national dialogues now, our guardians, our communities. Truth and reconciliation. This was something that was quite interesting. It's a benefit, but it was almost like a bad word. People did not recognize it, but it was something, it was more a response that it wasn't happening, but we put it up there. And also, of course, collaboration with government agencies and developing respectful relationships. So I just want you guys to take a look at this. This is only from 4 pilots, and they identified over 90 specific benefits. Can you imagine if we actually get to a national level and actually seeing what everything you guys are doing? It's going to be just overwhelming. This was one of my favorite things, just to see the full scope. So now we get into some of the fun numbers. So basically we have the inputs, and this is where we're getting the funds. And as Val said, it's not just the NGN, the core funds, but it's from different kind of other things. In my community, we have, they bring in different consultation funds because it's the guardians on the land that are collecting the information to make the informed decision making. And then, of course, we have the standard expenses that we all incur as an initiative. Salaries, honoraria, travel, you know, and then the different core activities. And then we moved into, as I just mentioned, the community benefits. And at the end of this, and it wasn't myself or NGN, it was the lovely Eco-Plan, because I am not a social SRI expert. We brought in these lovely people. You're seeing the numbers. So for every dollar invested, we saw a range from $13 a return to $7, so 7 to 13. So that's amazing. For every dollar that was invested, we're seeing those kind of returns. So this is some of the, you know, guardians, as we know, are having a real impact on the land. So these, as we were doing these surveys, discussions, dialogues, I wouldn't say really an interview, you know, really communicate. This is some of the different things we were hearing from the different communities. You know, when I see youth learning, for me, it gives me hope. We are starting to heal the past. Like, this is the stuff that we were listening to, and it was overwhelming. It was everything I'd hoped for it to be. We also heard some of the negative, of course, why we needed the funding, but. So then we go into the personal benefits. So we also thought, because it's not only, like Val was saying, it's not only just at the community level, it's guardians, what they're getting back from in this working as a guardian. So this is a lot to see. So some of the core benefits at an individual guardian level was connection to culture, of course, building skills, knowledge, learning and growth, employability overall, even outside of the community, enhancing personal well-being, because as we all know, for myself personally, I need to be on the land to be grounded. Just an FYI, I came a few days early and spent 2 days up in Tofino and in the forest, not on the ocean, and it was beautiful and peaceful and what I needed, so miigwech. And also fostering community connections. It's not just outside the partnerships, but it's also dialogue between the different working groups in the community. And what's interesting to note, if you look at the colors, they're quite small, but if you look at the forest green, of course, as a forester, and then the purple at the end, by being a guardian, you're seeing a lot more than before, or significantly more. So you're seeing that impact. It's changed, community members' lives, being a guardian. So, yeah. And then, of course, we did the return on investment at a personal level. So on the right, don't get too, it's a lot of stuff, but basically it was the individual's response. We asked them to rank and weight, as I said, very difficult. But what you're seeing at the end of the calculation was that for every dollar of income, there was a $9 return on investment for personal benefits. So it's just overwhelming. So, and then the key ones are connections. Connection to community, connection to land, skills, being respected in the community. They're seen as knowledge holders as well. And there's, the next slide is that there's some quotes. Overall well-being, connection to culture, and employability. These are some of the higher ones. So some more quotes from the different guardians. We've become the people the community trusts, people they reach out to. That's a very important statement for me. Then, of course, we have to look at, as I look to my community member from ECC, benefits to Canada, because this is something we need to bring to the table. So there was two main areas, and what we're looking at is meeting the federal commitments to overall the general public and Canada as a whole. So I'll start at the lower. It's strengthening and our relationship with Indigenous people. So this is where we're looking at UNDRIP, reconciliation, recognizing rights, interests. And then when we move up to the upper corner, we're looking at cultural heritage, environmental protection, and also public safety. Guardians play key roles in this. They are the frontline workers. They're monitoring and providing notification for health or for public safety. They're providing support and protection for spaces and species of not only our priority, but also Canada as a whole. They're monitoring illegal activities. And they're also, from what we're seeing, the lowest cost for ensuring all these activities, for the monitoring, for being on the land. We are the low cost compared to when we're looking at provincial or other kind of organizations carrying out similar work. So what are the next steps? So this summer, I will be with the NGN. We're going to be planning to do some more in-depth. These are going to be half-day, either coming in or virtual. We've been able to do it so that the booklets now, we can do most of these virtually. So we know Guardians' times are precious, and you guys need to be on the land. The other one is a high-level evaluation. This is an online survey, and basically it's benefits personal and to community. And it's for guardians and leaders. And actually, this is where I'm going to, like I said, Vanessa's here. She's going to have a booth just outside where you got the T-shirts yesterday. Please participate. It's a QR code. It takes about 10 minutes. It's very easy. And from each one of those, we're going to do a draw for a swag package that we'll mail out to you. And it's really helpful, and it's necessary to participate. Then after that, we are actually going to get all this wonderful information and data and start working at a community evaluation and start the reporting. And then there's the national, we'll be pulling it all up. And this is what Val and the NGN are going to be using to find the additional funding, the long-term funding. So, and I think we have a really good start right now. So just a little take home, key findings. Every dollar invested, $7 to $13 return at the community. For individual, every dollar that comes in, we're receiving those benefits in Canada as well. So for more information, most of you probably have my email somewhere. Please reach out. I'm more than willing to talk and share some of the findings, because I know this is a very quick presentation. And also, if you're interested in participating in the more in-depth, please email me as well. I would really appreciate that. So, Kichimigwech, everyone.
Want to say thank you to Val and Linda for their great presentation. Want to remind you, when you're doing your lobbying, to remind the government that healthy communities are working communities. Healthy communities are communities that are connected to the land. And in the land, there's healing for all of us. All right, can we keep it down, please? Thank you. Thank you. Just want to remind us that we're taking a break and we'll be coming back for the conversation with the Guardians from the United States. So please be back here at 11 a.m. Thank you. All right. Oh, how about that? They turned the music right as soon as I got up here. That's pretty cool. Maybe that's some power I didn't know I had. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Last night, some of you, we'd like to encourage you, guardians, to pick up the beautiful herring pendants if you didn't get one last night. I didn't see them, so if you didn't get one, you can go pick one up. I think they're out there somewhere. They were designed by Copper Canoe Woman and blessed last night by a song from Tom Childs and his partner Janet. And you will see there is a special message of love for guardians in the gift. You can receive them at the registration desk, so don't forget to go and pick up your herring pendants if you didn't get one last night. And don't try to be sneaky. No, I'm just kidding. You wouldn't. Guardians wouldn't do that. Also, welcome back. And before I introduce the next panel, if we could keep the conversations down, take them outside. I'm not kicking you out, but I am asking for us to respect each other's time and respect that we're doing some work here. And I want to talk to you a little bit before the next panel about our breakout sessions. These sessions enable you to explore a range of topics. We have 2 sets of concurrent sessions for you to choose from. Yeah, you're going to have to choose. One, for instance, you can learn about Indigenous-led natural climate solutions or training programs. Oh, right on there, keeping up with me on the slides, thank you. Or training programs that are helping prepare guardians for their work, or land-based learning that centers Indigenous language, knowledge, and sovereignty. Or you can input into how the National Guardians Network will support guardian initiatives going forward. That was a really great conversation that Val had with you, talking about the lobbying and what we need you to do next. That was really great to hear all of that. You can go to the event landing page at, oh, here we go, commercial again, www.guardiansgathering.ca to read descriptions of each breakout session and choose the ones that resonate with you. That's such a great word. Find something that resonates with you. We encourage you to engage, ask questions, share your experiences. I'm sure you're not all shy. The good and the bad, and dig into conversations that will help us all learn. Oh, there's going to be some great breakout sessions for all of you. Now, I would like to invite our next panel up, which will discuss the growing Indigenous Guardians movement in the U.S., United States of America. Research shows that there are at least 200 tribal stewardship programs in the United States, identifying as guardians or using different terms. Leading this panel is Dr. Chuck Striplin, a program officer in international Indigenous conservation at the Resources Legacy Fund. He works in support of Indigenous rights to access and manage ancestral lands. He serves on several California boards and commissions and has published research in a range of topics, including cultural landscapes and fire history. Remember, you heard a little bit about fire history from Dr. Cardinal yesterday. Chuck will introduce a panel of leaders and guardians from across the United States. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chuck and the rest of the panel.
Wow, these lights are bright. Mishmin Tuhish, hello. My name is Chuck Striplin. I am of the Mutsun people from the Monterey Bay region of California. It's about an hour south of San Francisco, for those that aren't familiar with the geography of California. To start off, I just wanted to express our deep gratitude and thankfulness for the welcoming of the Huangan people, the Esquimalt people, the Songhees, in this place of the smoked herring that has just been such a tremendous experience. And we feel like home when we come here among fellow Guardians. I wanted to start out briefly just by saying a couple words about our panelists here, starting with my fellow Californian, Megan Rocha. Megan is the executive director of the Puliclaw Tribe of Yurok people, and she's also on the leadership council of the California Marine Stewards Network, and she is also a commissioner with the California Ocean Protection Council. I've kind of seen Megan as one of California's, especially on the North Coast, overachievers in building tribal programs, environmental programs, advocacy, getting laws and policies changed, making funds available. She's just been a tremendous advocate for tribes in the Northwest Coast. Moving to Mary Hostetter. Mary is a village counselor and tribal steward from the village of Iglukik in Alaska's Bristol Bay region. Did I say that wrong? Iglukik? No? Igiugik. Igiugik. Damn, I even asked her ahead of time. It's a hard word. I'll get it one of these days. And then moving on to Sean Watts, Esquire. Sean is attorney, member of the a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, tribal court judge, and now the director of the Tribal Stewardship and Sovereignty Network, as we're starting to build this this Guardians Network in the U.S. And it's a little challenging to think about us starting this. Tribes across the U.S. It's 574 federally recognized tribes, more than a couple hundred tribes that are still considered extinct by the federal government. Starting back in the 90s, there was some semblance of national capacity building around guardianship in the form of the General Assistance Act to Tribes, which was very focused on contamination. The U.S. tends to compartmentalize its approaches to resource management in some strange ways. So starting in the 1990s, there was a lot of funds put forward for clean water programs, Superfund programs, lead, paint, asbestos, so all of these contaminant issues. But what it did was in almost every tribe in the country, it funded at least one or two staff positions that could build some form of capacity that was longstanding and continues to this day. Didn't really include the fisheries and wildlife and kind of natural resources, so those have been slower to come along and transitioning away from the kind of paternalistic, extraction-based policies of the federal government. But we are doing it. And it's difficult in these challenging times to know if this is the best time to be doing this or the worst time. But it is time. And I really struggled with thinking about how to talk about the context, the larger, the relationships between tribes and the federal government, tribes and state government. And I really reflect back on after the election in 2016 and then 2020 or 2024. I'm a father of 4 kids, and 2 of them are twins and 3 of them are girls, very proud girl dad. My twins that are now 21, they were freaking out. they were very saddened and scared, and they couldn't understand what was happening, looking to their dad to say everything's going to be okay. And with a lot of youth in the country right now, they're just very upset about what's going on. And I sat him down and I looked at him and I said, you each have a great-grandparent. Each of your parents has a grandparent, one of whom they grew up knowing, that was either in a boarding school, residential school, or an orphanage, not by choice of their families. And they understand what our families went through early on. My own grandfather was picked up off the streets in my tribal territory in 1920 when he was 10 years old and just disappeared up into Oregon to an orphanage. And all of the struggles that they have been through, I just looked at him and I said, just think about it in that context. As young women today, as members of a federally recognized tribe that has some economic capacity, they are in a better position, both personally, with their tribe, in the state that we live in, to fight back and to assert their rights and assert their sovereignty and to be future leaders. And that didn't solve all the problems, of course, but it helped them see what we're enduring right now in a different context, in a different frame of reference. And so, just talking about that context in California, we have a little bit of an advantage in that we are a progressive state. The relationship between the state and tribes has improved rather dramatically in the last decade or so. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been appropriated by the California legislature to support tribal land back, tribal resource management, access to resources, changing laws and policies. We now have a cultural fire practitioner law in California, where so one of the kind of centers of the universe of cultural fire in California is the tribes up on the Klamath River, the Karuk tribe and the Yurok tribe. And Bill Tripp, some of you may have come across him. He's the first traditional cultural practitioner sanctioned by his tribe in the state of California, which then, if he's on the fire, that fire then qualifies for the state's liability fund, which was the big impetus behind that law. And that's just one of dozens of laws that are coming out through California to benefit tribes, to benefit co-management, co-stewardship, land return, funding. And that's going to be really important for our national movement. California is the fourth largest economy on the planet. We have roughly the same number of individuals in California that live in all of Canada. So while at the same time the U.S. is not we are a genocide-based society that has yet to reconcile with its history. We haven't gone through that process that Canada has and a number of other countries have around the world. So we're trying to do this in the absence of that, or potentially in the stead of that in some states. And not every state is as progressive as California in these issues. So being able to help resource, help support, act in solidarity with those tribal communities in other states that have a harder time with more conservative governors, more conservative populations. That's really what I think the strength of this movement is going to be. And with that, I want to turn it over to Megan and talk about what you're doing with the Pouliqua tribe on the Klamath River and how that fits into this Guardians framework.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chuck. And I just want to say thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm very humbled to be able to attend this gathering and have a chance to share a little bit about the story that the tribe has gone through. I'm going to sort of put it in a state context, and I think Mary might help sort of frame the federal context in regards to her tribe. So the Polyclaw tribe of Yurok people are located in very far northern California. So as Chuck said, California is a very populated state, but not in the north. You can still go to the beach and not see anybody. We're very fortunate. The tribe's located near the mouth of the Klamath River. And some of you may have heard there was just the removal of 4 dams on the Klamath River, which was the largest dam removal project ever. So very exciting. We're also in the area of the redwoods, so pretty iconic. So I enjoyed seeing the redwood tree just right across the way. Reminded me of home. But so I do work for the Polyclaw tribe. I've also worked for several other tribes in our area. And a lot of what became the Tribal Marine Stewards Network, which is what I was going to talk a little bit about today, really sort of came out of this lack of acknowledgement from the state of California that tribes have unceded rights in the state. And so California is a little bit unique in the fact that there were 18 treaties that were negotiated in California, but none of them were ever ratified. So there are no treaties in California with any tribes. And there's over 110 federally recognized tribes in California. And several unrecognized tribes that remain. And so it was about 2009, 2010 or so, the state of California launched into an ambitious initiative to develop a marine protected area network throughout the entire state of California. And in that process, in the law itself, there was no recognition, like I said, that tribes had unceded rights, that tribes still gathered from the ocean, or that tribes had any sort of role in those protected areas. And so this really sort of catalyzed tribal engagement to really elevate the voices of tribal communities to make sure that they were acknowledged in this space. And we were very fortunate on the North Coast because the way that the state of California went through this process was they did it by regions, and they started actually in the central coast, and then down to the south coast, and then finally to the north. So we had the advantage of learning how the process was unfolding and really how to best sort of infiltrate it and break it down in a way. And so I was very honored to be a part of, on the North Coast, bringing together about 30 tribes to try to stand together in some sort of unified voice to really push back on the state and get them to recognize that tribes do have these unceded rights in the ocean space. And although it wasn't a perfect solution, we were able to get acknowledgement that tribes should be exempt from take within marine protected areas within their ancestral territories. So that was the first time the state of California had really recognized that tribes had these rights. And then following that, we're able to start working on baseline monitoring projects. And that was the first time the state of California acknowledged that indigenous traditional knowledge is a valid form of science that should be informing marine protection. So really that led then, through that advocacy, this realization of like tribes really need capacity, right, to be able to manage their ancestral lands and waters. So in California, there's very, very small reservations, which are unique in California, known as rancherias. There's really only 2 larger land-based reservations in the entire state. So tribes are really confined to some tribes, 6 acres. For Polyclaw, it's 228 acres. But obviously have a much larger ancestral territory that they still have an inherent responsibility to take care of. And so it was really sort of that advocacy and realizing that tribes needed capacity that we ended up bringing together, at that time, 4 tribes, coastal tribes, that really expressed a desire to be involved in this work, along with our state partners, and really sat down and had a conversation about, how could we do this together? There is a shared mutual goal of marine protection, right? So how do we sort of, instead of being in this constant state of opposition, which is it was a very adversarial sort of few years, I would say, with that marine protected area network development, how do we sort of turn opponents into partners? And so we sat around the table and thought, how do we do this collectively? And got the state to invest in a pilot, which is known as the Tribal Marine Stewards Network, and that was 4 tribes. And I will say, we didn't just come up with this idea. We were very honored to have the opportunity to travel to British Columbia and learn from what was going on. The Non-Wakulis Council invited us up and were very gracious to share their information and knowledge with us. We had an opportunity to go to Australia and learn from the Queensland Land and Sea Rangers. And so hopefully everyone in this room understands how inspirational you all are. And we are trying to build our work off of the amazing model that you guys have developed here. So, we started as 4 tribes doing this work, and the idea really is how do you build programmatic capacity? Much of what Val was speaking about this morning really resonated. Tribes are good at getting grants and doing projects, but that is not sustainable, right? We really needed to build, long-term programs that could really meet the needs of the tribal communities and elevate their voice, and particularly around species that were impacting tribal communities in particular. Sometimes the state and feds don't really care about those particular species because they don't have commercial or recreational interests. So how do we elevate those concerns and protect those species in places of importance? And so really the network, the pilot was for 2 years and started to do monitoring on the ground. And the way the network is developed is really it's about supporting each tribe's independent sovereignty and do it in a way that uplifts everyone together. So training opportunities, doing that together, going and helping our neighbors with their monitoring efforts, because, so it's really this collaborative partnership, but understanding that each tribal nation is going to do it in the way that makes sense for their community. And as the pilot was determined successful, we got another investment from the state to add additional tribes. So we're now up to 6 tribes. And, are really starting to find ways to weave this into, institutionalize it within the state process. This last year, Pulikla and our neighboring tribe, Tolowadeni Nation, sponsored state legislation, which really recognized for the first time the opportunities for the tribes to enter into co-governance and co-management agreements over their ancestral lands and waters with the state of California. And that would be at the Natural Resources Agency level as a way to try to de-silo the way that the state manages, to do it at a level that brought together the various sub-agencies. And I won't get into the weeds on that part for you guys. But so we are looking forward to initiating those negotiations to really elevate the opportunities for co-governance and co-stewardship. And then the final thing I'll just mention that was also based on the inspiration from the work up here was, the Tribal Marine Stewards Network is the capacity piece, but really there's also a need to claim the space publicly. And so we were really honored to partner again with Tolowadeni Nation, the tribe to the north, and the Shray Heights Indian community of the Trinidad Rancheria, which is to the south, and also our Yurok people, to designate in 2023 the first ever tribally designated Indigenous Marine Stewardship Area in the United States. Thank you. And I think the beauty about that is it's under the tribe's own sovereignty. It's under their, claims under their constitution over their territory. And there was been several questions, from our state partners, from federal partners about like, well, how are you going to get the state to recognize this, or what process are you going to follow? And so there's really been this pushback of like, you don't need the state or the feds to recognize your sovereignty, right? The tribe has its own sovereign authority under its own constitution. And, there's a great tribal leader in California who recently passed, who is very well known for saying, you're only as sovereign as you act. And so really, the tribal leaders in those three tribes really took that sentiment to heart and really are pushing, under their own sovereignty, this designation. So thank you for letting me share a little bit about some of the work happening in California, and for being here today. Thanks.
Waka, my relatives, I want to first start off saying thank you to the Esquimalt, Lekwungen, and Sanghees, the First Nations peoples of these lands, and to ILI for thinking of us to share space with you today. Koinga alaire duliogwa, nanvachwagamiongonga, igagagamiongonga, witaunga, igagagami. I can continue, but I'll just tell you who I am in English because it will save time. My Yupik name is Alaika Dooley. My Gasak name, my white man's name or woman's name is Mary Hostetter. My grandparents on my maternal side are Mary and Nick Nawadak, who are of the land in Alaska. And so you'll see if you hold out your right hand and you put your pointer finger and your thumb out, there's Alaska. And so I'm at this first knuckle right here, which is southwest of Anchorage. And so that's the land of the Yupik, Dene, Ina, and Sugpiaq peoples of Alaska. And I learned about Guardians in 2021 during COVID on Zoom, and I was incredibly inspired. I cannot tell you how amazing it is to see your faces reflected to me here now, because each and every one of you inspire me every day. And I think about you when I am at home and I'm trying to build our Guardians program and really solidify that in our self-determination. It's not a lie when I say if I am having struggles trying to figure out how to create a monitoring program about caribou, that I Google Indigenous Guardians caribou monitoring. And I use your lessons as ways to guide how we create our caring for our home, which is just amazing. So I just want to say, Guyana, thank you so much for that inspiration. I'm so excited to be here today, only because I really love these spaces. I feel uplifted and see you uplifted, and so I appreciate that space. When I learned in 2021 about Guardians, I saw a really big gap in our region. So that's also known as the Bristol Bay region. Some of you might have also heard about the Pebble Mine, which is the largest gold and copper mine in North America that has the potential to impact a lot of different watersheds in our region, but also one of the last strongholds of sockeye salmon in the world. Our lakes, our rivers, and our tributaries are nursery homes for our little smolt relatives, our salmon relatives that support all of us, whether it's humans, our bears, or our wolves. Our water and our salmon are so incredibly important, and there's not a lot of baseline data created around that space. And so our people also aren't uplifted either. And I saw an opportunity to build a sub-regional opportunity for Guardians, and so we're working on that sub-regional aspect while also parallelly working with other neighboring communities or communities across Alaska who are also engaged in Indigenous Guardians work. And there are a lot of names for this in Alaska. In Igiugig, we are tribal stewards. I work for my tribal government. I'm also a council member on our 5-person board, which I realized I didn't explain that part of me. I actually really like being a tribal steward a lot more than all the other parts, so that's always where I want to focus. But we're focusing our work on how do we collectively across Alaska create a program to support our Guardians, Sentinels, Rangers, stewards, really whatever we call ourselves, and how we care for our home through certificate opportunities. We're working with a couple different colleges. It depends on who you're working with. Specifically, Yagik is working with the Alaska Pacific University and the native village of Paimute, who has the Aksinak Rangers, to really figure out how we can certify our guardians and offer those training opportunities, which are really important for our communities. Those training and job opportunities means that our people can live at home. And I know that you all know about that because you're able to live at home and support yourself and your families and your communities in ways that are really meaningful to us being place-based peoples. And I have the amazing privilege to live at home today, and I want my peers and everybody else coming after, or even who are older than me, to be able to have that same opportunity, because it's not easy to live in our homes when you're not able to make money to pay for your bills. I like to joke that I can't pay Elon Musk in blueberries. He's not going to appreciate those, and I don't think I'd want to pay him in those anyways. But we can support our people with guardian positions. And so our programs focus on caribou, water, and salmon. Those are our three programs that we're focusing on right now, really rebuilding our relationships with these relatives that are sometimes often called resources. I fully believe that our words are really important. And when we think critically about the words we use and how we describe our relationship to our great mother, we are actively decolonizing the spaces that we're in when we recognize that we are not apart from, and I know every single one of you knows that. Can I get a time check? Okay. I have 5 more minutes. So you've heard a little bit about maybe my region, but I want to talk a little bit about Alaska in general and the movement of guardians across that space. I know that there are other communities who are inspired by the Canadian Guardians. Some of our communities and tribes have been inspired by rangers in Australia. Whoever we're inspired by, it's because you are caring for your home. And we come together in our groups, whether it's at the Alaska Federation of Natives, which I know you guys have an AFN too, Assembly of First Nations, I think, so it's funny that we have these same acronym spaces to connect. Or when we're collecting together in smaller regional efforts, we are thinking critically about how do we create a network where we are stronger together and we can learn from one another. A couple of our different partners, the Aksinak Rangers, they are doing cultural monitoring and erosion monitoring because they're on the coast of Alaska. So if you remember the map, they're kind of near the middle finger. And if you heard about Typhoon Merbok, which happened last year or the year before, I think it was the year before, it was a hurricane that hit the coast of Alaska. And what we're experiencing is that in the wintertime, when our shore ice is not frozen to the ground, those waves just batter up against our coast, and they lost 4 sets of dunes in one storm. And that's changing their way of life. They're considering moving their community. The Indigenous Sentinels Network, who is another partner, they live out, they're in the Aleut community of St. Paul, and they started their Sentinels program, which is what I look at as maybe one of the longer standing programs in Alaska. They centered theirs around marine mammals and the changes that they saw of their marine relatives as climate change was impacting their different food relatives that they depend on. And then in Southeast Alaska, the Southeast Indigenous Guardians Network has a relationship with the U.S. Forest Service. So they have a federal agreement with the Forest Service to support guardians programs. And as I talk about the federal government now, I realized I left that whole part out, so I'll talk about that now. The federal government in the United States, at least 4 years ago, with Deb Haaland as the Department of Interior Deputy Director, who is that right? Secretary, sorry, thank you, who is Dene. She was incredibly amazing to tribes. It was awesome to have an Indigenous person in that space. And so 4 years, though maybe not perfectly perfect, were a lot better than what we're experiencing now. However, the federal government in Alaska, at least in our relationship building, has been a lot kinder than the state of Alaska, who performatively recognizes our tribal sovereignty. So despite the federal government experiencing these growing pains, we'll call them, the people who we're engaging with, whether it's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, these allies are showing up in really good ways, supporting invasive species monitoring, which is a huge gap in the Bristol Bay region and something that we think about all of the time, especially with our waterways and Endolodia or the zebra mussels. We don't want those making them into our areas. But the state of Alaska continues to be one of our biggest challenges. They are the ones who manage our fish when they're in state waters. They are the ones who dictate when we hunt our caribou, and we can't hunt a specific herd of caribou due to those state regulations. And we see an opportunity to open those doors in really positive ways, and it takes a lot more time and effort than maybe the state wants to put in. But I'll end with that, with an example of a federal or our federal government supporting us more in those small ways that they do, whereas state government might not. So I just want to, again, reiterate that I am so grateful to share space with you. I am inspired by all of your programs, all of your people, and I really appreciate sharing this space. So Guyana, thank you.
Well, I'm looking out and I see so many people here, and I can say I'm really happy to see you. I was half convinced that you would just not attend out of protest because America has been playing well with others lately. And I saw Ethel here, and she's such an inspiration on top of the many other things. I don't know if you guys saw, but she just got a Starbucks delivery, she just sat down. Like, that is a career goal for me. I just want to be able to walk into a space and then people just start bringing Starbucks to me. I'm going to ask her secrets later on. So you guys are the inspiration for the U.S. in more ways than one. Not only have you built something remarkable here, but Val had the foresight to then look to the south of the border and say, is that something that we could build in the U.S.? And the answer to that is yes. And having you as an inspiration and as a model puts us in a position to be able to do that with fewer growing pains than I think than we would have had otherwise. Despite what this current administration looks like, that actually has provided for us an opportunity to do this building phase with intentionality and the kind of patience that it takes to get it right. And so despite what's going on nationally, we really view this as an opportunity. The way we've started to build this is to look towards the folks on stage here. You guys in Canada may not realize this, but California and Alaska together make up roughly 50% of all the federally recognized tribes in the U.S. So you're looking at half the U.S. just right here on the stage. Yeah. It's not really a surprise that California and Alaska are also a lot further along, I think, than other folks are in trying to establish tribal conservation programs in the U.S., partially because Alaska is tucked up way north and doesn't get paid as much attention to by the U.S. federal government. And so that actually allows Alaska to do a lot of its own thing. And their own thing has been a remarkable set of tribal folks on the ground, really making sure that they are taking care of their lands, their species, their waters. They're sort of on the front lines of that. And in a way that we are all in the lower 48 taking lessons from. California is very similar, what they've done in the Klamath region and the work that they did to get those dams down. I think 4 down, and there are 2 more to come down soon. The restoration of species that we're already seeing, the numbers of salmon runs and lamprey eel that are coming back, specifically because these dams have come down, has been remarkable and happened remarkably quickly. And that's, again, because those initiatives came from the tribes themselves. These are not coming from EPA folks. They're not coming from the Nature Conservancy. It's not coming from Greenpeace. All that's coming from the tribes in the region, making sure that they are taking care of their land, species, species and waters. And so we're really in a fortunate position overall in the U.S. to be in a spot to be able to take advantage of the lessons that you have given us and the energy that California, Alaska, and other parts of the U.S. too have started to build the momentum for us. So we are looking towards being able to do this with a sort of regional network approach. And so Alaska is their own kind of region. California is very much its own region. Hawaii actually is rocking and rolling. They are a very grassroots collection of folks who have been for a long time doing their own thing, and really Hawaii being the least colonized of all the states in the US, both because they're out of the way and part of it's because they are the most recently to have contact. And so they're really doing well. We've got folks in other regions doing, so the Great Lakes has their own sort of network. The 7 most recent tribes in the US, I shouldn't say most recent tribes, the most recently recognized tribes in the US, the 7 in the Virginia Chesapeake Bay area are now starting to build their own network. We, of course, have the Bears Ears Coalition, which is Colorado, Utah, that area. The Pueblo tribes, which are in New Mexico and Arizona, are starting to build their own network as well. So we have these regional networks popping up. And then part of what we're trying to do as an umbrella organization is really provide the ability for these groups to network and share learning, share knowledge, share experiences, share the burden, the load, the workload that comes along with being a network and trying to build these programs. So fundraising together, getting ourselves to conferences together, making appeals to local, state, and federal governments together, doing all those sorts of things. And the work that they're doing really, really matters a lot because of the legal structure in the U.S. is such that we can actually engage in environmental protection and conservation in the U.S. without having to go through massive legal fights because of how some projects that with mines, for instance, get approved. Sometimes they have to go through environmental impact studies, and which includes subsistence studies. And here's where guardians are really critical. So I don't know if you guys know this. It would actually be, I'm actually now kind of wanted to just set aside and just have a conversation with you guys about this. Do you guys know that the most recent data on subsistence in the U.S. comes from, I believe, 1993? Which means when the U.S. is going to approve a project for mining in Alaska, for instance, part of what they go through is asking, are there people living in a subsistence level off the land? And in Alaska, the answer to that, from a data level, from the U.S. federal government, by and large is no. Now, Mary, is that true? That's definitely not true, right? The idea that there's no people living at a subsistence level off the land in Alaska is absurd. Yeah, it's not just wrong, it's absurd, but that's what all the data says. And so projects like these mines get approved when they shouldn't. What Guardians can do is be the conduit to a new collection of data, to be the folks who can say, not only are they monitoring the land, they're monitoring the species, they're monitoring the water, the air, but collecting that data and then submitting it in a way that that stuff is now on record, so that when a new mine wants to come into play, that you no longer have to go through that long fight. It's just like, look at the data. It's there already. And we can look at that data and then not have to go through such a long fight to get the mine disapproved. Or not have to go through such a long fight to even have the mining companies or other companies have the kinds of conversations that are required by law for them to have with the local tribes if you have subsistence going on. So those things I think are really critical to why the Guardians program is so important in the U.S. And as Mary was telling us, the U.S., and I know you've experienced this in Canada as well, we go through peaks and valleys, we go through ebbs and flows of the government-to-government relationships between our tribes and our federal and sometimes state entities. And we are good at, I think I saw one gentleman earlier whose shirt says something like resilient and relentless. That's exactly what we are in the U.S., what our tribes are, what we have to be. So this period that we're all experiencing now, I think Mary called it growing pains. I think many of you might have other words for it. That period is just something we will continue to be resilient and relentless about, and these Guardians programs will make it so that as we come out the back end of this, we will be ready to take advantage of the new administration that comes on and is a lot more amenable to the rightful relationship that the U.S. is supposed to have with its tribes.
Maybe just to circle back to the beginning, could you maybe introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you're from and what you do for a living?
Yeah. Yeah. See, I don't matter. The Guardians matter. So my name is Sean Watts. I was born and raised in the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, which is kind of like in the center of the U.S., and so have been working in the field of federal Indian law for a long time as a tribal judge and now as a tribal Supreme Court judge, on top of being a law professor with a specialty in teaching federal Indian law and conflict resolution. So, kind of lots of different things that don't matter nearly as much as what the Guardians do. So I just kind of skipped that piece.
We have a little bit of time. I wanted to see if maybe folks in the audience had any questions for our group, or if we have a way to facilitate that.
The question is, Ethel, how do you get Starbucks delivered to you? Is not, you can't ask that one. I'm going to get that secret from her later. Do I see?
You're going to make me run. Run for my lunch.
Thank you for being here. My name is David Dick. I'm the senior manager for the Quintalian Wasanich Marine Guardians program. One of our goals with our program is creating an identity that gets recognized. What are you guys doing to get an identity being recognized by your own government?
Can you say more about what you mean by an identity that's
Well,
recognized?
for us, it's creating the identity where we get recognized for the work we do and creating something that, even with our work clothes that we have, is creating that recognition that the governments that you work with, they understand who you are and what you do for your own nation and the area that you work in.
I can try that, except I never turned my microphone on. Oh, you could have? Thank you for that question. And a lot of it for us is relationship building. And as all of our programs look different, all of our relationships look different, it is taking an idea or looking at the landscape of our traditional territories and building those relationships with those different entities, having meetings, creating that space, hosting their leadership in our communities, and really bringing forward our concerns and why we want to do what we're doing.
What's the biggest obstacle for you in getting a national network, do you think?
So we aren't doing it with the eye toward any sort of like federal recognition of that, though we will do exactly what you did in Canada, which is at some point appeal to an administration who we know will have the kind of hearts and mind to hear it, that the U.S. federal government should be ponying up significant federal funding for this. So I don't think it's really just willpower at this point. Like getting this national network is exactly what Mary was talking about with relationship building. We've done such a good job already of connecting with the regional networks that are popping up. So turning this into something national, at least informally, is not an issue. I think the idea that it would become something formal like you have here, where it's its own standalone entity, that is, I think, going through the same process you went through here, which is that you have to build over time and eventually make the appeal for public funding for that. We have such good relationships with private philanthropic funding already that getting the sort of loosely connected regional networks going hasn't been an issue. So it's really building towards a future where we have an administration that's going to be willing to hear what we have to say and doing what you did, which is collect the right kind of data and present that to them so that the business case for why Guardians and a Guardians network is not only necessary, but advantageous to the entire American general public, not just the tribal stewards, is I think, our next step.
I'd like to answer that maybe on a different realm too. And we're hopeful that storytelling and sharing what we're doing through really charismatic videos will be really helpful. We collect a lot of drone footage of our region wherever we go, whether it's specifically in Igiugig or in Kakanuk or in Pedro Bay. We collect this drone footage to be able to share those stories out and build that context for others, why Guardians are needed in these regions. And hopefully that will connect with somebody in an urban setting that this area needs to be protected. And we're learning with our other programs as well how to create that storytelling.
And a lot of I think where we really rely on Canada's example and the ILI example is really narrowly defining what the Guardians organization will do and what it won't do. It's not an organization that's trying to squash or subsume the sovereignty of every individual community and nation that self-governs. It's not speaking for them. It's really threading together existing coalitions and trying to come to an understanding and agreement of a common core language that we can use in solidarity with each other and with Canada to really build that inertia, that voice, whether it's the water protectors or the fire guardians or groups trying to get dams down, for all of those endeavors. The Buffalo Treaty Tribes is a tremendous example, a transboundary intertribal treaty, and hearing from Paulette Fox from the Blood Tribe of the ceremonial process behind that, and incorporating that learning into how we even talk about our own movement. I mean, I first came to Vancouver Island in the 90s when the Clayoquot Sound protest was going on, and just was inspired by some of the First Nations people that were involved with that. And I had a friend that was on the one of the Nunavut Territory Implementation Boards, and just hearing about the journey to that process and the notion of creating an Indigenous governed province just blew my mind, 25, 30 years ago. And continuing to study and just incorporate that learning into the way I talk about with my colleagues and my fellow tribespeople in the U.S., that we're all part of the same movement in New Zealand and Australia. I've learned how to articulate some of these ideas. Like one of my Maori friends talks about deconstructing the 4 pillars of colonization: the individualization of land ownership, the individualization of income, the Western religions, and the relationship with the land that comes from those belief systems. And this is especially powerful in California, domesticated agriculture. We didn't have agriculture in California, ever. That's a new trauma to our soils and watersheds. And so these 4 pillars that we're trying to deconstruct and being able to talk about it in those terms, it kind of, puts in context the struggle, because we all talk about individual reservation sizes or reserve sizes and individual parcels. Like, it never used to be that way. That's a big boulder to try and push up a very steep hill. And so just being able to understand the scope and scale of the struggle and understanding what we can do with each other in that context has been really powerful for me.
Time to wrap it up.
Okay. I think that is our time. Thank you again to everyone for having us here, for making us feel welcome, for your songs, for your prayers, for your good feelings, and thank you to my fellow panelists, and we'll see you tonight.
Thank you. Good job. Good job. That was really wonderful. I'm going to look you up. thank you. That was a great discussion. Thank you for the questions that came in. Just before you rush off to lunch, don't move yet. At lunch today, we're going to try, no, we're not going to try. We are going to take a group photo. With so many, it's going to take a little bit of time, but we're going to go over to where we're eating lunch at Crystal Palace, Crystal Gardens, it's somewhere fancy, right? So please be sure to join everybody over there today so we can include as many as possible. We're going to bunch everybody up, take a quick photo, eat. So hurry over there, get in the line, we'll eat. All right? And thanks. And I know how Ethel got the Starbucks, just saying. All right, see you there.